and welcome to Beyond the Lines. My name is Sarah, I'm the artist behind Pinselgeschichten, and on this episode of this very lovely show, where it's all about the colors and how you can convey things and do things with just the right tone of color, I'm gonna work in the Outlander book. It's a scenery that I'm gonna complete over a couple of weeks, 3 to be exact. And after the orange lesson now that I just finished in October last year, I thought it's time now to, well, have the interim scenery thing going on before I go to the next color. I have selected this particular page here. Let me show you this one. That's the one that I'm going to work on over the next 3 weeks. Today I'm having a base color or base color code happening with Inktense pencils and water. So it's gonna be scary. It's a mixed media page in the end. And I'm going to show you how I get rid of that white paper in only a few minutes and, well, talk to you about the things that I choose and why I do what. So join me here and find out. Hi everybody! So, like I said in the intro, we are going to work on the Outlander book. And today I want to show you how you can achieve depth in a drawing or a painting or a coloring page. There is no different there in any kind of artwork with different media, and how they might play together rather well there. So what I also want to show you in this particular first video is what I do when it comes to prep work. Now, last time in this book we colored the first page, or I did, and you maybe colored with me. And now I'm gonna work on the second page, because with this book, like I said in this video show for this page here, I'm gonna go through chronologically and not skip anything from the stories. So this page is done and I'm going to work on this one. Now, I do not expect any work to be done here, but still what I like to do is have a little bit of paper in between pages, just to not have any pigment transfer should anything, well, be a bit harsh on that paper. And I do have quite a bit of pigment there on this page, so I'm just taping together 2 pieces of normal A4 printer paper, nothing fancy, and I just put it in between there, and it protects the page. And I do that with pretty much all of my coloring books. For example, here's another one that I'm working on off camera, the Imagimorphia, and, well, there's a lot of papers in there already. And I keep those papers for as long as I work in those books, and then when they're done, like here, there's another paper as well. This is, by the way, the next book that we're gonna work on. So once I have filled a whole book, I might take out those papers, but not while I work with them. Also, I'm having cardstock that I put behind the page that I'm working with, because last time I didn't really, and I saw, okay, I got ink transfer here and I don't want that per se, so let's work with the cardstock, and then I don't have ink transfer to any other page. Now, for this week, it's this lovely piece here of Mrs. Claire Randall, and the text says, "After 4 years as a royal nurse, I was enjoying the escape from uniforms and rationing by indulging in brightly printed light cotton dresses, totally unsuited for rough walking through the heather." Well, this page here, I find that very lovely when it comes to the story, and I looked it up in my copy. It's the German version of Outlander, and there's no more description about what color her dress is. Now, in the TV show,
it doesn't have a print on it, and it's just solid cream color. And I'm going to play color-wise with a combination of the two. What the TV show does and what the book says here, or the text says. So light colors, which to me says something like yellow or a mustard, saffron kind of a tone, maybe even light ochre, and then for the flowers, and then have the cotton maybe in between there. But it doesn't say anything else, so I'm just gonna stay with light colors. Now this is May, and by the way, I decided for this one to paint or color her a bit more towards what she's described in the book, and not the TV show. With the page here, I had the TV show pretty much copied there when it came to color scheme, but not for this one. I want to have it more towards the book. And from the line work in this piece here, you can already see she's the focal point, of course, but anything that is stones, the tree here, and that foreground that she stands on is close to you, that is foreground, and anything here in the back is background and quite far away, not only just 5 meters, but that's more to 500 meters, or like really far away. So she's on a hill, and she's having the background there far away. So color wise, what it does is anything here in the foreground will be pretty intense and dense when it comes to color, and everything here will be very pastel and very blurry. So what I like to do for this particular page here, and I do that with other drawings and paintings as well, but I want to show you on this one because I think it fits pretty well, is using different kinds of media to work on background, foreground, and play with that and make it quite, well, not simple, but maybe kind of easy for you there. So here I just had a tiny bit of gouache as another medium to color pencils to work with. Here I'm gonna work with 3 different media. For one, the trusted polychromos pencils that I also used in the page before. Then I'm gonna work with pastels for the background. And as the medium layer of color, I'm gonna work with the Inktense pencils. And that is what I'm gonna start with, because, well, usually I will start with the background, right? Let me say that in so many colorings and drawings, and when you just watch for my Instagram account and just see the photos, well, I always start with the background there. Not with this one here. So media wise, what I want to do is I want to have the sky done with pastels, because it's a rather big surface and I want it to be very smooth, and pastels really work well for that. But in order to apply the pastels only where they belong, I do have to have other media to stop that pastel crumbs to go everywhere. Meaning I have to color everything first, and the last thing to do is add the color, the pastels, excuse me. So the polychromos I want to use especially on her, on those tiny flowers on the dress, and just to intensify shading. So I don't start with polychromos either. What do I want to use the Inktense for? Well, that's very easy. The line work looks quite painterly. It doesn't look, for example, as straight cartoon or manga lines as here, or in this is also more painterly. You could make a real colored painting style thing going on. Same goes here. The line work is just different from, say, this page here. It's just thicker lines, straight lines rather than the squiggly lines. This is also more on the cartoon side. This one here is very different in the line work, you see. And the page that I'm working on today is also more towards the painterly way the lines are drawn. she's pretty much outlined, and everything in there is more to the painterly style and with the squiggly lines, you know? So the way I want her to look is, I call it painterly, and not like a print, like a perfectly block colored print. I don't want that. I want her to have the illustration-y, painterly look that you very often find in old children's books, at least in Europe. So what Inktense does, it helps with that, and I'm gonna work with the pencils today. I could also work with the blocks, but I find that I can go into the smaller areas with those pencils way easier, so I'm gonna use them to my advantage and work with the pencils here. I have a full set, and well, I use them quite a bit. So I'm just gonna put them to the side. Which side though? That side. Because I'm gonna zoom you in a minute here. And I want you to be able to see what I'm doing on the page rather than what pencil I'm going to pick. I'm gonna have the information of the pencils on my blog anyways. So what I want to do is use the Inktense with water. So I'm gonna have some brushes here that, yep, there's enough water in there. In them, I'm gonna liquefy pigment. So I'm not gonna color the whole thing with the Inktense. Well, they're called Inktense, so that is phonetically very, very close to intense, and that's exactly what the pigment with those pencils is there. You can see here on my swatch, they are just like boom in your face. Very, very much a vibrant medium, very colorful. So I have to be careful. But for example, I could use tones like 1700s or 1710 for, say, the hat, or any other shading on the dress maybe. And if I only apply very few pigment pieces there, I can make it work. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna zoom you in for one so that you really only see the page. It's just when I come to other elements, I'm gonna zoom you in more. But that's probably the colored pencil part then. But I'm gonna go rather quickly around this page now. And I'm first of all gonna sit down, because when I'm standing up, I can't really color well. So, and now I'm not gonna look at the pencils on what to choose, but I'm gonna look at the swatch, because, well, you can see here on the dry colors that it's not really very helpful to just look at the lead and then see what that color does. I like to look at the liquefied parts. So I'm gonna choose colors. Let's start with the easy part, that is the nature around Claire. So we got gray for the stones, green for the grass and for the moss, so that's 2 greens, and a bit of very light blue for the background here. So the clouds and the sky I'm gonna leave. I'm not gonna color that, but the tree and everything else here. So let's start. The easy thing, the grays, they're here. So what do I want? I want 2120 for the background, and 2120 is neutral gray. So I want that for those mountains here. I want 2110 Payne's gray for the stones closer to Claire. And I also want some brown in there. What is that color? Maybe the 2030. What are you? Chinese ink. No, I have to go one down. Let's go with Indian ink, the 2020, that has more of a brownish tint. So I can work with those for the stone closest to us. For the greens, I can flip them over. I want the mossy green, which I think what I'm gonna do there, I'm gonna go with 1540. That is light olive. I'm gonna go with 1560 for the for the grass. And I want, what do I want for the tree? I could actually work with a combination of the two. And then for the grass here farther away, I do want the 14, the very light apple green. I have to be really careful with that. Then we go for the tree trunk. I want a rather cold brown. So the 1730. And that takes really a while to choose the colors, but then you can go rather quickly around your drawing or coloring and just go from there. But it's really, well, very essential to take your time in choosing the colors when you work with Inktense and have a large area colored in just a minute there. Now let's go to Claire. What do I want for her? I'm choosing 2020 for skin tones because this is my go-to color. It's called Sicilian Yellow, and you will find out in a minute why I like that so much. She has light brown hair, so I'm gonna introduce, am I? No, I'm not. I'm going for the 1700, which is called Mustard, for the dress and shading there. Also for the hat, and I'm going to mix up the brown from the tree with the mustard for her hair. Now for the shoes, she's probably, and for the hat, she is probably wearing something very similar when it comes to color. So I'm just gonna mix the colors that I used or that I have here so far. And what I'm gonna do now, my dear people, is apply color. So let's go from right to left, because again, I'm left-handed and I don't want any pigment to be dragged where I don't want it. So I'm starting off with those mountains there. Or maybe I should, oh, I forgot the blue from the river. I need to add that because I want to work with the same blue for the mountains. Let's go with 840. 840, that is, what's it called? Iron blue. Let's go with this one. So I'm gonna introduce the blue first. Just gonna get the pencils out of the way. Ah, gosh, this table is too small. First class problems, folks. So I'm starting off with iron blue. So I'm going to color the lines here that are already in the river, and I'm having a tiny bit of pigment towards the upper side of the river now. Where does it go? It goes there. Okay. Then I'm going to introduce that same color, tiny bit only, to one side of the mountains. And a bit more towards that rig there. That's all. You don't need more. But what I need now is the neutral gray, which is the color that I want to use for that mountain here. And then a bit more here. So the farther away I get, the more grayish my coloring gets. Towards the front, there's gonna be a bit more green, so I'm gonna introduce a bit more gray here, and also on these stony parts here and here. Do I have any on this side? That's green, green, green. No. All right, so now apple green. Come to mama, apple green. Need a... Now this one is really almost neon, so I have to be very careful, and I have to put it in there in a way that I could liquefy it a lot. So I'm just pretty much putting it, the pigment, into the shadowy parts of things. And then I'm gonna drag that color towards towards the lighter parts. So there we have that. Oh, we got a bit more the gray down here. I didn't see that side. Okay. Okay, okay, okay. Alrighto. That's it for the background. Don't need much more pigment. Now coming to the fore. Oh, I forgot. Haha, there's more between her legs. Need to put some pigment there. Otherwise, I'm getting in trouble. Alright. Now, the stones. They are fairly easy to color. That's the gray. Where's the brown? The brown. Indian ink, that's the one. Payne's gray is the one. And I wanted that is the grass color that I'm having here. I'm gonna just have to look at the pencils and what color I chose for them. That is the one. The light olive is the green for the moss. So let's start with the moss. Just again, putting pigment down. Not being very specific, just roughly within those lines. It's rather fairly simple, folks. Just pretty much orienting myself on those lines that are already drawn in here. And if you use that for a coloring that you, or a drawing that you did yourself, well, you can just follow your own lines. You can work the same way. So for the gray, going more towards the top here, just putting in quite a bit of pigment here at the lines that are already introduced. I'm having squiggly noises and I don't like that. Better. Bit more green, those parts here. Okay. Now I'm going to introduce the Indian ink, which is more of a browner tint, just going in between the gray parts, but not solidly, still in those sectioned lines only, because I still want to have lighter parts. I just don't want to have warm gray, cold gray going on. Still want the lighter parts, so just putting that pigment into the darker places where I really want intense color going on. And I'm going about that the same way with the other stones. So moss, 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 more moss. This stone doesn't have as much moss, so let's go with Payne's Gray next. Now, I'm having tree trunks here, so this is a bit more tricky. I have to be careful later on when I liquefy that pigment. Same goes for anything around Claire's body. You just gotta take your time then when you liquefy. You can be fairly rough when you apply the pigment with the pencils, but later on when it's liquefying time, you just gotta be a bit more careful. Alright, gray is done. Now I need the Indian ink, the more brownish tone. Add that to the shadowy parts. Bit more down here. It really looks like nothing, folks, I know, but it's gonna. Don't worry. Be brave when you work with Inktense. When you work with them for the first time, you will probably freak out. Well, at least I did. But if you ever worked with watercolor pencils, then you know, or liquefying markers, like for example the Tombos, you know how the general way of working with that kind of pigment is supposed to go down, and that there's always the freaky part, and then there's the, oh, this is supposed to look, this is how it's supposed to look kind of part, you know? So again, introducing Payne's Gray with the lines that are already drawn in. And adding a bit more pigment for warmer nature with the Indian ink pencil. Alrighto. Maybe it needs a bit more here. Yeah. Alright, so the stones that are standing up are done. Now I can do the same thing with the stones that are laying down. And there I'm just gonna take the warm gray. I'm not gonna use the other colors. There, just play with one pigment, light and shadow, done. You know? Like I said, sometimes it's fairly simple. Alright, now for the ground underneath Claire, I wanted number 1560, that's called Fern. And I'm not gonna add the flowers now. There's tiny bits and dots here that will be flowers, but I'm only gonna add those once I get, oh, maybe, yeah, I'm gonna add a tiny bit with the yellow pigment there, but I usually just work like that on details when I come to the next medium, which would be the polychromos in this case. So I'm just gonna put down quite a bit of pigment in the shaded parts, so shadow section. The rest I'm gonna leave that, but I need that yellow. No, that's the skin tone. That's it, mustard. Having just some tiny blobbies going on here. And once the Inktense pencils are dry, you cannot, well, they're permanent. There's no way to have them liquefy again. Like, for example, you do have that problem with, what's it called? Watercolor pencils. So you don't suffer that problem here. So now I'm just going for the skin tone again. At the points where I would shade, I'm putting in the pigment, leaving the rest empty, and I'm going to pull the pigment with the water once I liquefy. And any details, I'm gonna spend quite a bit of time with colored pencils on top to intensify. Now that would be the skin. She is wearing a cotton dress that has those tiny flowers that I'm not gonna color, but I'm gonna color the shadows of the dress and pull that pigment in. Now you can see here I'm going super lightly, just tiny bit of pigment. Again, I want this to be mostly a cream colored dress, but still it does have shadow going on, and I could either go about it with the colored pencils later, or I can have a more, like I said in the beginning, the painterly look, and therefore introduce the Inktense with the pigment there. Now for her hair, in the lighter parts where there's no hat, I want to have the mustard tone, because again she's supposed to have light brown hair. And then I'm going to check out what number I have there. 1730. That one. Yep, that's a brown. That's the darker one. And I'm going to have that in the shadow areas of Claire's hair. Going back to the mustard tone for the gloves, just a tiny bit of shadow area and a bit of brown more on the darker head rim. Maybe introducing a tiny bit of the Indian ink, which was almost it's a brownish black. And then on the outer rim, I'm gonna introduce the mustard that I also had on the dress and in the hair, just a tiny bit, and I'm gonna show you what interesting effects you can have when you color like that. Now for the tree, which is the last thing to add pigment to, I'm starting off with the trunk. I'm just going around and adding a tiny bit of pigment to the branches, not much. Just a bit on the bigger parts. Because I can really pull that pigment quite a bit, so I don't need every bit of the surface covered. There's going to be enough pigment in the brush later on. And it should work on this paper. So that's enough for the tree trunks. Now I need a bit of green. Oh, no, I forgot some. Oh boy. Where's the oak? Oak. There it is. Need to have a bit here. But now I just need to Add a few blobs of green to the trees. So, all right. There we go. And again, this is a very fast way to put down a base layer of color, and then you could either call it done, or you could quote unquote just work on intensifying things, shading things, and it's not as overwhelming. I mean, there's very many people that are overwhelmed by white pages when they want to start artwork. It's like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to fill that? Well, you can fill it in a couple of minutes by putting down some Inktense. And there's a leaf and there is a leaf. Did I miss any? I don't think so, but gonna have a bit of shading going on here, just around the edges. Now, where is it? I need some paper towels, and I had some. I'm so unprepared. Am I blind, folks? Probably. Oh, no, I see it. It's on the other part of the studio. Hold on. All right, there we are. Got one paper already there. So now the scary part starts, which is coloring. I'm going to start with the tiniest brush. So I have this brush here. It's a little bit, oh no, I need to refill it with water because there's not a lot left in that barrel. But that's not a problem. Once I find... Ah, there. So I'm using distilled water for my brushes, for those plastic brushes, because while I keep the water in those barrels quite a bit, I don't take out the water every night when I close down my studio for the day. So I'm using pipettes for my spray bottle that has also distilled water in there, and then I can keep that water in the brush and in the spray bottle, and it's not gonna get filthy, or there's not gonna be any minerals or bacteria in there that could harm the material. All right, brush is refilled. Oh, come on. All right, let's put that aside. There we go. Now I'm ready to work. Again, like I said, I do have the smallest brush. I do have two brushes that have bigger tips, but don't want to work with them for this particular piece here. So let's start with the background again. And I'm taking a damp brush only. I'm not having a lot of water squirting out of my brush there. It's just damp, and when I feel that it's getting too wet, I'm gonna, well, put the brush onto my paper towel, and there I can get a bit more of a damp brush again. And then I'm just pulling the pigment that I had put down earlier to where I want it to go. It's fairly simple process, folks. You can get as messy or as maybe not so messy as you prefer. The paper in the books, of course, will crinkle. Well, that's what paper does when it's hit with water. But I don't mind, and by using colored pencils on top, the pressure there will uncrinkle the paper again, so I don't mind having a bit of warping going on while I apply water to the ink tints. But if you're not really a friend of that, there's 2 options that you could use and still get away with it. For one, you could either if it's a book where you would be fine with removing the paper, like out of that book, you could take out the page you want to color, and you could tape it down to a board before you apply the pigment and ultimately the water, because then warping won't be as bad. Or you could, what was the other thing I just thought of? Oh gosh, I'm getting old, folks. You could use, well, other media. That's one thing, if you're not happy with that. Oh, or the other thing is, but that is only for your own use, is you take a photo of the coloring page and just the outlines pretty much, and then you print exactly that photo on watercolor paper, and then you color that if that's more to your liking. But yeah, I don't mind having the crinkly thing going on here, so I'm not gonna bother. I got the background done. Now let's go to the stones. I'm gonna start with all of the moss first, because then I do give the pigment time to dry before I go right next to it with the grays, and I can prevent quite a bit of mixing with those colors when I give it a bit of time to dry already and become permanent. Simple thing, it's just timing, folks. That, though you work rather quickly, prevents mingling of colors. So easy. And I really like the vibrancy and the like the surprise thing going on. I mean, I know what's gonna come when I color. Excuse me, I had to take a sip of coffee. When I color this, I know how the pencils work, but still I love the moment when I liquefy the pigment and it makes for a painting, you know? It's like, yeah. Magic or science, whatever you want to call it, same thing. All right. When you have too much water, the paper might peel a bit on you, but again, since I put colored pencils on top, I can repair things or mask them. So I don't mind if this looks rather rough for now. You can see with the pigment that I did put down, it really covers quite a bit when it comes to square footage, right? It's it really is very efficient and vibrant, that color. And you can pull the pigment to kingdom come. I mean, sometimes I rather have to be careful that I don't have too much pigment down. than to less pigment. So especially if you want to have the watercolory look, you really have to, well, put down pigment on your paper towel in between sometimes. But still, I find this a very easy way to color quite the big surfaces. And again, like I said earlier, if you're one of those people that is intimidated by white paper and finds that a bit scary, this is a rather fast way for you to, well, get rid of that problem. Alrighto. Now, next up is the big stone behind Claire, and there I have to be a bit careful where I'm going to pull the pigment, because there's pigment pretty close to each other from things that are on different layers. Can you even see? No, I have to pull down the book a bit. Hold on. There you go. So, when I color up here, I have to be careful not to pull the pigment into the mustard too much, and also to not pull the gray into the green too much, because the green is before the gray and the mustard is before the green and the gray. Just saying. Alrighto. That seems to work out okay here. Now, another thing that helps when you have pigments of different layers quite next to each other, and you're not coloring one by one by one by one. So I mean, like having the stone colored first, and then liquefy, and then color the tree, and then liquefy, and then color Claire, and then liquefy, but going about it like I just did, which is putting down the pigment for all 3 layers in one go, and then liquefying pigment. It helps when you then go layer by layer by layer, meaning I'm just coloring the stone now, and I'm not taking care of Claire or the tree above. I don't know where my voice went there. Sorry about that. Where the tree parts up here. I'm gonna give the ink a tiny bit to dry up there, and then I will color it in a minute and not have the blending going on, you know? Now, let's color between her legs a bit. And there again, I have to be careful not to pull the pigment too much into the grass, but I will quickly liquefy the mustard from the flowers. I will intensify those once I get to the colored pencils and put down detailed shading. But that's gonna be in the video next week. I'm not gonna get to that this week. I'm just going to finish liquefying everything, and then I'm gonna call it an episode. And next week I'm going to take care of the shading with you. Until then, that paper definitely is dried, so I'm not gonna have any trouble there. So let's go for the last stone. Moss first. And then again, the stone. It's always a surprise. I mean, you can see it a tiny bit from the pigment, what's to come if it is the cold gray or the Indian ink. But still, it's always kind of a surprise there, and I like that. You can see on my example here that the paper definitely can handle that tiny bit of liquid going on. I don't have any peeling at all so far. And I'm not the most careful person when it comes to liquefying pigment. I sometimes do have a tiny bit too much water going on in my brush, and then the page might wrinkle a bit more and the paper might peel, but as long as I don't really flood the paper, I find that with this book you can, well, be only semi-careful. I mean, I would never just dump water onto this paper, then probably, well, you won't color a thing there anymore, but you just have to be reasonable with the amount of water you apply. You don't have to be super careful there, just a tiny bit. Alright, big stones are done. Let's color a bit of mustard there, and then I'm wiping my brush because I don't want any pigment transfer. I'm going very light where the grass is because I know that I want to use colored pencils on that later on. Let's quickly go with the mustard here. And then I'm starting at the lighter part, and I'm not pulling the pigment into the parts that I haven't colored, but just go about it the other way around to have the gradient look. Now it depends on how much pigment you've got down, how much you have to color. Like can show you in a second here on the grass what I mean there, but it's usually with Inktense it's quite helpful to go with the liquid from not colored to colored parts if you want to have a gradient look, and not go the other way around like you would, for example, with the Tombows or with watercolor pencils. But I will show you here in a minute. Just need a bit more water for that part around the stone, because I gotta pull a bit of that pigment into the white part here. Again, taking pigment, pulling it into the white part here, and almost have it look lemon yellow. So it's far away, but it's pretty much the bottom of Craigh. So what I meant with you pull it from the non-colored to the colored part. I'm taking the next bigger brush, and I don't have any pigment down here. Just have it here in the shadowy parts. So what I'm gonna do now is not go like about it like this, but I'm going with the non-colored part and pull the pigment, or wet it there and then pull the pigment. So there is a fairly simple way to have a gradient look. Otherwise, because the pigment of the Inktense is so intense, you might not get the gradient look if you pull it from the side that you had colored before into the non-colored parts, unless you dab away a bit of pigment like I just had here. So let's do that again. Can you see my paper towel? Yes, you can. So if I were to liquefy the pigmented part first. I can really pull and pull and pull and pull, but I don't want as intense a pigment on the sections that I didn't color now. Just dab it off once and then you can pull again. But I find it more natural and easier to just start at the non-colored parts and then pull in the pigment into the wet already. Alright, now background is almost done. Just can you see? Yes, you can. I'm gonna take care of the tree now, and I'm going to go back to the smaller brush. And first of all, of course, a sip of coffee. All right. And I'm going to start with the leaf that is on Claire's dress, because that gives me enough time to then color the rest and not have any bleeding going on. Concentrate. And there's so many other leaves here that are just dangling in the air. There it's really important to just have a damp brush, not a wet brush, otherwise you have the bleeding going on like with this leaf here, but I will be able to repair it in the end. Now, first with the tree is the tree trunks that I'm gonna color, and then I'm gonna go through again and color the leaves. Why is that, you might ask? Well, the leaves are sitting on top from the perspective that we have here of some of the branches. So, to make sure that I see the branches and then have the leaves cover on top. That's why I'm not starting with the leaves. But it's pretty much like an anatomy of the tree. You go from the skeleton to the muscles to the skin, you know. So I'm going from the branches to the twigs to the leaves. Okay. And with some of them, I don't mind if I don't stay in line perfectly, like especially with the tiny twigs here. Again, this is what I said in the beginning of the video, the painterly look, because this looks more painted than drawn or colored. And I do like that effect for some colorings where I want to convey a painted scene there. And by applying pigment in the end for the background, for the sky with the pastels. Oh, I have to move my paper. With the pastels, I can remedy a few, well, colorings out of the lines later on. With the leaves here, I'm just coloring in squiggles, not going about it with a particular technique. I'm just gonna see them as green blobs rather than leaves here, and I'm coloring many at the same time. I'm not going one by one by one by one. Just makes it more natural. And also faster, of course. Again, since I'm planning to add a bit more shading and stuff with colored pencils later, I don't have to take care of every little leaf here. And later I can decide how much shading I want to have. I have a bit of shading already going on, but you cannot really see a particular light source here yet. Or can you? Do you know where the light comes from? Oh, I don't. I haven't decided where my light source is yet. But I think I'm gonna have it come from the upper right-hand side. Oh, I forgot to color Claire's shoes. Oh no. The mustard, just adding a bit of pigment there. Alright, oh gosh, sorry. The next thing to do is, or the last thing also to do, is to color Claire with the ink tints. And then we're pretty much done. So I'm going to start with her skin tone because it's the lightest tone here. And it's closest to all the things that I have to color, and I want parts to be dry before I do anything else. So I'm just very carefully liquefying the pigment and pulling it as far as I can, and then I have a natural shadow, for example, going around her jaw because I left everything else white. So again, going about it same manner, liquefying the pigment carefully and pulling it into the wet. Makes for a very smooth transition. And the same on the other arm, liquefying what I don't have colored and then pulling the pigment. And if you hear a weird noise, that's the printer next to my office. Sorry about that. Hubby is printing. Same, of course, goes for the legs and the toes. Liquefying, pulling, liquefying, pulling. It's really very simple to color with ink tints and have a solid layer with light and shadow already. So now I go back to the top because I want the legs to dry a bit before I go for the shoes. I'm gonna go for the hat. Now with the hat I do have pigment coming from two sides, so I'm gonna color the middle first and then go into the mustard, which is the lighter color. Pull that. And then I'm going to the darker color, which is the brown and the black. Pull that. See? Get a very gradient colored look that is very simple to to finish up then and have look interesting with colored pencils. Next up, the gloves. I'm not gonna color her watch yet. I'm gonna leave that for the colored pencils, but I'm going to color the dress now. Now I have so few pigment down here at the dress that I'm not gonna color all the parts that have no pigment there, because I just want pretty much a border going on. And I know that I have a lot of empty space there. So there I'm just going over the pigment and pulling it towards the non-colored sections and have it look very smooth. But I don't have enough pigment to pull it so that I could color the whole dress with that. It's really just enough for the lines here. And that is why I'm not bothering coloring or wetting the rest of the paper there. Alrighto. That's the shading on the dress done. Now I'm going to the shoes and then the hair, because there's quite a bit of wet part left. Let's go to the shoes first and not make a mess. Right. Now for the hair, and then I'm done. I'm going from light to dark. So from mustard to brown, and I'm pretty much just liquefying. I got a lot of pigment down for that tiny bit of a surface. So I'm being very careful with where I put my brush. Tiny bit too much of a brown. I have to repair that then with the colored pencils, but I'm going to drop on top a tiny bit of the skin tone, the Sicilian yellow, just to lighten it up again. Alrighto. That's that. I do have all the pigment liquefied that I need. I'm gonna stand up and look from afar. Yep, I do like the coloring. Gonna zoom out a tiny bit. So this is what it looks like so far. And again, like I said, it was very simple and quite fast to just put down pigment and color. The longest thing, I think, was deciding what colors to take. Now I'm gonna let that dry, and next week I'm going to take care of details, which means I'm gonna switch to the polychromos and yeah, color with you there. So I hope you enjoyed watching along. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. I would love that. Also give this video a thumbs up, or share it with a friend, or subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because that really helps and I very much appreciate that. I hope you enjoy your day. Maybe you have this book as well and color with me. That would be awesome. And then please, 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 if you like, send me photos of your coloring, because I'm curious. I'd love to see. Have fun, everybody. Take good care, and I'm going to see you next week with part 2 of this particular page here. Bye!